G'day cocktail lovers, I hope you've been keeping well. I hope you're ready for some more cocktails. I'm going to do some variants this coming week of one of my favourite cocktails, the classic old fashioned. Except the ones I make aren't really going to be the classic old fashioned, they're going to be riffs on it. And that's because it's old fashioned week, first week in November. So in the lead up to that, I'm going to start and I'm going to just explore some old fashions. If you are unfamiliar with the old fashioned, I'd be slightly surprised, but it is basically, it's the cocktail. It's arguably the first cocktail was what we now regard as an old fashioned. And the formula of that is very simple. It's spirit, sugar, and bitters. These days, if you walk into a bar and say, give me an old fashioned, 99% likely they'll just make it with a whiskey, or they might ask you what you need, because it can be any spirit. So this old fashioned week, I'm going to do a few variations, show you some ideas to put a bit of variety in, because honestly, just using different whiskies or different spirits obviously makes a very different drink. But one of the fun things you can do is vary the sweetener, and that will give you very different drinks. The other thing you can do that's fun is split the base. Rather than just having one spirit, actually do multiple spirits. And the first one I'm going to do comes from this little book, the Death & Co book, which I do recommend you get if you're all interested in cocktails. It's not just recipes, although there's a lot of really good and interesting recipes in here. It's also the story of Death & Co and teacher's technique and their whole insight into cocktails and being a bar. It's well worth it. I got it for my birthday, and this particular old-fashioned variation, as soon as I found out there was old-fashioned week coming out, I'd been wanting to do this one. This cocktail is called The Conference, and maybe it's called that because it's bringing a lot of different things together. It's taken the split base concept about as far as you can. Namely, there's 4 different spirits in this. Now, the version I make is not going to be the same as the one at Death & Co because I'm going to use all Australian components, but it's going to be analogous to the actual elements in the Death & Co one, and this also comes back to, one of my favorite things, never be scared to improvise. If you see a good recipe and you don't have the exact ingredients, but you have stuff that's like the ingredients, give it a go, because most of the time it's probably going to work and you might discover something new. So without further ado, I'm going to put together an Australian version of Death & Co's Conference Old Fashioned. This does have whiskey in it. The Death & Co recipe recommends a bourbon. I'm going to use an Australian whiskey, a single malt from Starwood, their Nova. Again, wherever you are, you can go with a whiskey you like. It's all gonna make for a slightly or sometimes radically different drink, but it's half an ounce, 15 mils of whiskey. And there's more than one type of whiskey in this recipe. It also calls for a rye. I've got another local one from Melbourne, from the Gospel. This is a very special one. This is higher proof than the one that Death & Co used. It's one of their limited release barrel strength ones. It's 57% alcohol. So it's got a little bit of kick, but it's very mild drink wise. But we're also adding half an ounce or 15 mils of rye whiskey. Now we're starting to get more unusual with the spirits that are in this particular old fashioned. The Death & Co recipe calls for 15 mils of cognac. Again, I said I was going to be all Australian. This is a really good quality Australian brandy from the 23rd Street Distillery called their Prime Brandy. This is the top of their line. They make a few different ones. But once more, this is all equal parts in the split base. So 15 mils, half an ounce of cognac, or just brandy of your choice. The final spirit in this split base is apple brandy or applejack, or calvados if you're going with the French one. I've got an Australian apple brandy from the Belgrove Distillery in Tasmania. They call it Apple Hatchet, and this was a recent discovery of mine. First time I discovered an apple brandy made by a good quality distiller here in Australia, and it's very nice. And same as the rest, we are going to do half an ounce or 15 mils of apple brandy. After the booze, we're going for our sweetener in the old fashioned. The Death & Co recipe said to use a demerara sugar syrup. I'm using this sugar syrup I made with some raw sugar and chai. So this is my chai syrup. So again, My profile is going to be quite different to the Death & Co one, but it's in the same ballpark. And we're just going to do the equivalent of a bar spoon, about 5 mils of our sugar syrup. For the bitters element, it's also splitting the bitters on this one. The recommendation is 2 dashes of angostura and 1 dash of chocolate bitters. But look, if you don't have a huge bitters selection, not everyone does, before you've got angostura, go for it. It's a really reliable spirit. Sorry, I was going to say spirit. It's a really reliable bitters, and it's what's traditionally, particularly in a whiskey, old-fashioned. But if you have it, 2 dashes of angostura and 1 dash of chocolate bitters. The old-fashioned, in its many guises, is a stirred cocktail. So I've added ice to our stirring glass with the help of Gaz Regan's finger. I'm going to stir. Now this is both to chill and dilute the drink, because it is all booze. Bitters is booze too, even if it's only in small amounts. So, yeah, depending on your taste, you're going to want to stir this for probably at least 15 or 20 seconds. But you can also taste periodically. And I'm thinking that's pretty good. I'll just give it a little bit more, and then we'll pour it. Unsurprisingly, for an old-fashioned, I'm putting it in an old-fashioned glass or a double rocks glass, and with a big old rock of ice is the way I like to do it. Some of my fantastic sexy clear ice. Hopefully it's tempered sufficiently while I've been making this, because I don't want it to crack when I pour the cocktail on, but we'll try our luck. Just pour that over the ice, and that has worked nicely. Ooh, yes, I like that. Showing off the clear ice nicely. Look, honestly, to pretty it up, maybe a garnish as well. Orange peel is one of my favourite garnishes for an old-fashioned. Actually, I have a blood orange here today, so I've done a bit of blood orange peel, spritzed the oils over the top, and then I've done it on a skewer with a maraschino cherry, because I'm always looking for an excuse to have a maraschino cherry. But that's a rather gloriously coloured old-fashioned. Now for the taste test. Well, that's just the mix of the spirits in there, and in fact the bitters is coming through. Just that little note of chocolate bitters goes in well. From what I read, Death & Co, they do a lot of experimentation before they put a new drink on the menu, and that mix of spirits might seem random, but I'm confident they did a lot of experimentation to get that balance: the whiskey, the rye, the applejack, and the brandy. And it certainly works. But yeah, there you go. First of the old fashions for Old Fashioned Week. My Australian version of Death & Co.'s Conference Old Fashioned. Just goes to show, when the base is a spirit, it doesn't have to be one. Split the base and get some interesting new flavours. So I'd be interested in what your particular favourite Old Fashioned is, or if you want to try this one. But whatever you're doing, Old Fashioned Week and beyond, in fact, I do hope you take care. By that I mean, take care of yourself, take care of people around you. Until I see you again, I will say cheers.